Hello everybody. I think those that want to join have already arrived. So we're going to discuss the application of the Kesh Foundation GANS plasma technology to prevent and overcome the African swine fever and the blue ear disease in pigs. Sorry, I just couldn't find to switch over to the next slide. All right, the information on these trials, it was a very detailed trial that was conducted, and the paper that was written by MT Kesh was presented in the April edition of the Plasma Times. So I do recommend that everybody go back, and if you haven't read that paper, is to read it again. It's a very long, lengthy paper with a lot of details and descriptions. So I do recommend that you go back and reread that paper, because there's a lot of information in there. And what I'm going to do is to just go through a brief overview of the different trials that were conducted. I won't go into all the details that the report has gone into because it won't do it justice. The best is to actually read the report yourself. I will also discuss several interesting points that sort of come out of the trial that I feel are important for us, and then how we can use that information in our everyday life. Okay, first of all, African swine fever, or it's commonly known as ASF, is a very highly infectious and contagious viral disease of domesticated and wild pigs. And it is sort of known as a double-strand DNA virus. The swine fever is usually fatal in pigs, in that the only method to contain the virus and to stop the spread of the virus is to essentially kill the pigs that are infected with the virus. There's been no other way to combat the virus in the past. The symptoms for the pigs is high fever, depression, anorexia, loss of appetite, hemorrhaging of the skin. So it's really a slow death for the pigs, quite a gruesome death for them, and there's just no other way of combating the virus. And there's been no sort of swap over the virus into the humans, so it's not harmful to the human beings at all. The blue ear disease is known as porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome, or PRRS, and it's otherwise known as the blue ear disease. And it's a single-stranded RNA virus. And what this does in the pigs is causes reproductive failures in the breeding stock, so it mainly affects the female pigs, as well as affecting their respiratory tracts, lungs in the young pigs. So that's just a breakdown of the two diseases that they were dealing with. The current impact, this figure of 500 million pigs in China, when I was trying to look for some information, that ranged from 400 to 800 million pigs in China. They're the world's biggest pork producer. So the impact of this virus on their industry is huge. So the African swine flu is transmitted through direct contact, obviously between the pigs themselves, poor sanitation, insects, and even through processed meats. Now, what we mean by the processed meats is that what they found was the virus in the pig meat stayed in that meat for up to 2 weeks. So what would happen is, even though the meat would be consumed by humans, it would have no impact on humans. But what they would do is any scrap meat would be fed to their pigs. And this is how it was then transmitted onto the pigs. So that's why they do not want it to enter the food chain at all, because then it's very easily transmitted to other pigs. It also devastates many small-scale farmers in China and around the world. It's not just in China. There's lots of outbreaks all over the world. All right, so we'll start back on this slide. So the estimated number of pigs in Australia is between 500 and 800 million. That's the sort of numbers I could come up with. And they are the world's biggest pork producer. Now, this disease can be transmitted through direct contact, poor sanitation, insects, and even through processed meats. Now, the processed meats is what they found is the virus can remain active in the pig meat for up to 14 days. So any meat that is gone into the food chain and eaten by us, say we have no effect, it doesn't have an effect on us. But then if that food is, the scraps of that food is fed to the pigs, then that disease can be transmitted to those pigs. So in this way, it's devastated a lot of small farmers in China and around the world, and it just seems to be becoming more and more of a problem. Okay, the initial trials was carried out on a single pig. It was a farmer who has been a knowledge seeker for the foundation and been following and making his own GANS. So what he did was he started giving his pigs some of the GANS water, and it showed signs of recovery within 3 days. So that was the initial trial carried out. The second trial was on a small farm with about 30 pigs that showed the signs of the African swine flu. And again, the pigs were given the GANS water, and 2 weeks later, they showed no signs of the virus. So these were the early tests and early indications of the effectiveness of the GANS on the virus. The third trial, which was the main trial of what the report is all about, they got cooperation with the Chinese government and a corporate farm which had 829 infected pigs on their farm. This was the 18th of January this year. The original plan was to treat 80 pigs only, so the Keshe Foundation team there had only taken enough GANS to the site to treat 80 of these animals. And what they found was they had to, they were given a shed, and they had to look at treating 800 animals. And 19 pigs had already died by the time the team had got to the farm. So on arrival at the farm, as you see with the pictures, there was a lot of dead pigs around. So the conditions were not great when they first arrived. What they would do is, picture on the left would show how they would dispose of the bodies, wrap them up in the bags, and these eventually would be buried. So the conditions in which they arrived, as you can see, were quite horrendous. So what they did was, the shed that housed these pigs was then divided into different sections, and the GANS water was sprayed on some of the animals, and other animals were given the GANS water to drink. I'll go through some of the details of that. This picture shows the shed and how they divided the shed into different sections. The yellow arrow there is the entrance, and at the entrance they divided. On the one side you had where they placed a lot of the sick pigs, the really sick pigs were placed there. On the other side, all the dead pigs. And then they divided the rest of the shed up into sections 1, 2, 3, and 4. So what they did in the beginning is they started cleaning the entrance where the dead pigs had been placed. And then they started spraying the area with the GANS water. And then the sick pigs were fed with different GANS waters 3 times a day. And then the corridor that were linking all different sections was sprayed, initially on the first day was sprayed twice to change the environment of the whole shed. And then throughout the entire trial, this corridor was sprayed at least 3 times a day with the GANS water. On the first night after the spraying and feeding of the pigs with GANS waters, they sort of noticed how the pigs were lying down quietly and a bit more relaxed, not so much under stress. The first day into the trials, the pigs showed no signs of recovery at the first stage. Then on day 2, they took section 1 and they sprayed the pigs and fed the pigs with the GANS water. Then the pigs that were in section 2 were removed from these and placed into the other sections so that they could create a buffer zone between section 1 and 3 and 4. And then these zones were also sprayed with the GANS water. In section 3, this section was isolated to test the effects of different strengths GANS waters, and the pigs were fed both the GANS waters and being sprayed once a day. So what they did was they tried different combinations of the GANS waters on the pigs in this area. And then section 4 was left untouched. They did not spray any of the GANS waters in this area, nor were any of the pigs given the GANS water. So essentially, when you look at the picture at the above there with the shed, they sprayed and gave the pigs in the red areas there. So it was at the entrance, the corridor, and then sections 1, 2, and 3, leaving sections 4 untouched. So what they were trying to create is an entire environment around the shed, so that where they'd sprayed the GANS water at the beginning, at the entrance, and then spraying it in sections 1, 2, and 3, they were creating this environment so that even though section 4 was not sprayed, you would create this flow of the magnetic field gravitational fields between the entrance area and sections 1, 2, and 3. And when they look at the results at this after the trial, the bottom table shows each of the sections where the pigs were housed and the number of deaths that were recorded in each section. And you can see on the graph it goes from 17th January, 18th, 19th down, and all those numbers represents the death of a pig. So what I've done is I've highlighted those sections 1 to 10, which is essentially section 4, and sections 29 to 36, which is also section 4. So these were the sections where the pigs were not sprayed at all, nor were they given any of the GANS waters. And as you can see, there is no real difference in the death rates of the pigs over the first 4 or 5 days, which shows the effect of spraying the GANS waters on the two ends of the shed, and it created this entire sort of dome across the whole shed. So even though those pigs in section 4 weren't treated at all directly, they were still being impacted by the fields of the GANS waters, and which still helped those pigs to recover, even though they weren't directly sprayed or fed with the water. So this was a very interesting part of the trial. So some of the observations were, after the first day, most of the pigs remained feverish and were not yet showing any signs of recovery. And then 1 or 2 days later, 1 or 2 of the pigs which showed and died of the blue ear virus. After 8 days, there was a total of 101 pigs that had died. And then after 14 days, there were no signs of the virus or fever in any of the pigs. And at this stage, they had declared that the trials were successful because there was just no more deaths from that shed with the pigs. And then what they'd done was created preventative protocols which were kind of implemented throughout the other farms within that company. So with the results, the treatment of these pigs under those severe conditions showed incredible results, because normally out of 800 pigs, most of them would have had to been killed. So there would have been almost 100% loss of the pigs. But we had saved probably close to 700 of those pigs. And the effects of the GANS waters could be clearly seen, affecting the animals from the 3rd day. And after 2 weeks, the company declared the initial trial over and successful. So this was the first time that the African swine fever was treated, saving the lives of not 800 pigs, but 700 pigs. So that was the full trial there. It was just a very brief summary, so I do recommend you read the full report. But at the end of the day, it was a huge success, because when you consider the state of the pigs when the team initially arrived there, and how after 3-4 days they started stemming the tide of the deaths of the pigs, and how the pigs started then to recover. So when you look at one of the important points I want to highlight is the actual virus itself, and how using the GANS and the GANS waters combated the virus. Viruses are packets of energy. So it's a plasma of a high magnetic gravitational field strength. And this virus attaches itself to the amino acid structure of the animal. And this interaction is magnetic gravitational field interaction. That's how it attaches. And what it does is, because this virus is of a very high energy and attaches itself to the amino acid, it depletes the energy of the amino acid cell, leading to the destruction of that cell. So you have a very strong energy, you have a very weak energy, and because there's this interaction and wanting to create that balance, it depletes the cell of its energy and leads to the destruction of that cell. So what we do with the GANS, as we said, the viruses are packets of energy. So now we add our GANS, which is also a plasma and a packet of energy. So the GANS material connects with the virus, and we deplete the virus's magnetic gravitational field strength. So we have to find a match with our GANS waters, find a match with the virus so that it attaches itself to the virus. And because you've got your GANS waters and your virus of a high strength, the GANS now depletes the strength of that virus. And now the virus now has a lower magnetic gravitational field strength, and then cannot damage your amino acid cells. What happens in the animals is, as you deplete the energy of the virus, obviously these cells that have already been damaged by the virus can lead to a lot of secondary infections in the animals. So that's something that one has to be very aware of. And then as they depleted the energy of the virus, they found that the virus can behave as a new virus, but of a lower strength. And this new virus of a lower strength then affected the RNA of the animal. And this new virus led to a secondary effect of the pigs, which they found a few days later, where the pigs then started showing the symptoms of the blue ear virus. So this is the first time that it's shown how depleting the strength of one virus led to the creation of another virus, which is not as severe as the first one, but it still impacted the animals. And then what they did was they applied a second round of GANS waters, which were mixed up to find a match for this virus. And again, depleting this virus of its energy, which then led to the eradication of this virus. And again, because of certain cells that had already been damaged, you got secondary infection in the animals. And all these secondary infections were also treated with a GANS mixture as an antibiotic to help combat all those secondary infections. And the GANS mixture used for the antibiotic had a similar strength as a typical antibiotic that is used. So in summary, what happened was the pigs had the African swine flu virus, and these were treated with certain mixture of GANS waters and GANSes. And as they depleted the energy of that virus, it led to the blue ear virus, and they treated that with the GANS waters. And then any secondary infections from both viruses, again, were treated with the GANS waters, resulting in healthy animals. So it was an interesting exercise in seeing how the virus is transmuted and how the understanding that a virus is a high energy package, and all that we are doing with the GANS waters is to try and find a match with that to deplete its energy so that it does not behave as that virus anymore, and it does not affect the cells and health of the pigs. The future applications of this understanding is first of all looking at what a virus is in a human or a body or an animal, and that virus is just a plasma of a very high strength. So just this understanding leads to a whole new approach on how to tackle viruses. One has to find the strength of the virus and simply develop a weaker strength of the virus to attach to deplete the original virus of its high strength. So you've got a very high strength virus, you've got to create a very low strength match, and the two link up and just deplete. To find a balance, it will deplete the high strength virus and create a new balance. As we've always known, the stronger feeds the weaker, and in so doing loses its strength to come into balance. The Kesh Foundation and the Sierra Leone University had also successfully conducted a lot of trials on the treatment of the Ebola virus several years ago. In Australia, we have the Hendra virus, which affects the horses. There's the bovine virus in cattle, AIDS, many other viruses in which this application can be used as well. So this understanding on the pigs opens up a whole new world for the treatment and understanding of these viruses. Another important point to understand is to why some viruses affect some people or only certain animals, like in this case it affects the pigs but not any humans, is because very simply we have to understand our amino acids contain the basics of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen. But these are not all of the same strength. So, for example, the carbon strength in a pig's amino acid is not the same strength as the carbon in our human amino acid, so the virus cannot attach itself to the human cells. There's no match, and so the virus cannot attach, whereas it finds a good match with the pigs and affects the pigs. So this is another understanding of why different viruses affect certain animals and not others. Another interesting observation out of this trial was when they did some of the testing of the blood. 10 test tubes of blood samples were sent off to be tested, and different GANS waters were added to 2 of the blood samples, and all 10 were sent off at the same time. Now, they added the GANS waters just to see the effects of what that GANS would have directly on the blood of the infected pigs. When the results came back the next day, all the blood samples showed no sign of the virus. So what had happened was the 2 tubes, which had affected the other tubes, resulting in all showing a negative result for the virus. And this again showed the effect of the field transfer between the samples. So by adding the GANS water to 2 out of the 10 test tubes, and they were all bunched together, sent off at the same time, the field interaction from those 2 had interacted with the viruses in the blood of the other and reduced the strength of those viruses, making the results negative. And this is exactly the same as the effects we had seen and other people have seen with experiments around the world of how your very strong affects your very weak. Another interesting observation from this farm was the smell and the odor. Now, the use of the GANS water as a spray had a dramatic effect on the overall smell of the shed. When the team first arrived, the smell, I can only imagine, must have been quite horrendous with the death of the dead pigs and dying pigs. And the use, after the spraying, after several days and even after the 2-week period, just to continue spraying with the GANS water had changed the entire environment around the shed and the smell from that shed. And it was, to me, it was the use of the CO2 GANS which would have this effect of reducing the smell, because we had that same effect on the radish experiment, where after 180 days of our radish sitting in the fridge, it didn't have a smell at all. And what it is the carbon within the CO2 absorbs the smell. So it's just like in the old days when we put a lump of coal in the fridge to get rid of its bad smell. It's the carbon within the GANS which is doing that same effect. So even now the CO2 GANSs can be used as a disinfectant and odor controller. Now, the blue ear virus has a very different meaning from a plasma perspective, in that the blue ear virus is an emotional effect and a sign that the animal is under stress. So the animal is so stressed that it does not want to become pregnant or to bring any offspring into the same condition of suffering that the mother is in. Because as I mentioned earlier, the blue ear virus causes particularly the female pigs to not suffer from abortions, bad fertility rates, and everything like that. So this is because the pig is in such an emotional state that it just does not want to bring more life into its same condition. And this is why this virus particularly affects the female pigs. And so the high temperature that they also have is a sign of stress and the emotion. And it's just like when we get really angry and upset, then we often see our ears get really, really hot and red. And so it's the same effect with the pigs. And just another thing on the swine flu in humans, there is no connection between the swine flu in humans and the African swine fever on the pigs. The original swine flu was originally associated with pigs because that's where it first was discovered, but subsequently they found out that there was no relation between this particular swine flu and pigs. But the same understanding of treating the viruses can be treated in all other animals and in us as human beings as well. Some of the applications. So what we can see from this trial is drinking the GANS water. We know that it helps improve our health, but it can also help to prevent any infections of any flu viruses this coming winter for people in the Southern Hemisphere. So just this drinking of water, even spraying your environment with the water, spraying your house, outside in the garden, all has an effect of changing the environment in which you're living, which helps to keep you healthy and to prevent any infections. One can also give the, as we know, the plain CO2 GANS water to pets and farm animals with the same understanding, is to make them healthy enough so that they are not infected by any diseases. Let's say spray your areas wherever you're living all the time. Another option is to place small bottles of GANS of different ratios, different strengths, all around your house, so that you're also creating a flow of the fields between those different bottles throughout your house. So in effect, you're creating a huge interaction of fields in your house, and it essentially creates a dome around your house. So there's many simple things that we can do around the house, or if we've got a small farm, to make our animals and environment as healthy as possible. And that's the end of the presentation. As I said, the full details of this trial is in the April Plasma Times, so please go back and read it, or if you have, reread it, because it's really a fascinating lot of information there. What I've presented today is just some of the information that I can pick up from it, and I'm sure a lot of you will probably pick up a lot more information from it as well. So thank you very much, and then we'll just open for questions if there are any.
Okay, we're unmuted. Do you want to? Lisa, can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we hear.
Okay. Good.
Hi, Jimmy and Lisa, it's Neil.
Hello, Neil.
What were some of the other GANSs? I haven't read that paper yet.
They didn't go into specifics on what type of GANSs. They were just labeled A and B and F, and so they were just different combinations. So we have no details of what GANS.
Do you want to have a guess?
Yeah, lots of guesses.
But I think what you have to, there was a teaching a little while back in one of the knowledge seeker workshops where Mr. Kesh explained how to get rid of a herpes virus. I don't know if anybody picked that up, and I can't remember which knowledge seeker workshop it is so that I can go and chop into a small piece. But what they explained was that you take a little bit, you know, like a fever blister, for example. You would pop the fever blister and take a little bit of that exudate or whatever you call it from the fever blister and create a tiny little bit of GANS out of that. And then you would take your strong CO2 and CO2 aminos, if you have aminos, and then add a tiny touch of this dilute, tiny little bit of that herpes plasma. So you're creating a very strong CO2 amino connection, and you're creating a very weak connection to the actual virus. So I suggest they might have done something like that for the treatment. They would also have used copper in the as an antibiotic, at least copper, maybe other things combined with it.
Silver, I assume, and probably zinc as well.
Yeah, well, especially for that blue ear virus, from an emotional point of view, you would want to use some zinc to help support those animals.
So that's
In the matter state, zinc is also known to interfere with virus replication. So
yeah, well, you know, it's just it's an emotional, you know, zinc is for emotion, in whichever state you take it. So yes, it would have an effect. But this is how you work on treatment, I would suspect. But if you look at the healthy pigs in that shed, and the spraying was good enough to keep those pigs relatively healthy, I suspect that if one did the same with the GANS and GANS water, the CO2 and the zinc, you would come to possibly not pick up that virus in the first place, just like the pigs seemed to all cope and their blood was all clear after 2 weeks. None of them had actually, you know, gotten infected.
cool. I found that a plasma patch of your special formula with the gold, silver, CO2 and the zinc and whatever else you had in there. If you got a sore throat or something early enough, it completely prevented the cold from developing and turning into a cold.
It's good to hear.
Yeah, and a patch of CO2 on your lungs, if you've got a cough, will immediately get rid of your cough. That's what Russell needs now, a patch on his lung.
I was just hearing that and thinking somebody needs something. But yes, I think, you know, and the trick is if you can't just do it a little bit, because if you just do it a little bit, it's not strong enough to affect you, which is the weaker. So you have to give it a really good go. I had a lady also contact me the other day asking about like some kind of a cat, that virus in cats that slowly kills the cats. And I said to her, well, if she wants to do it for her cat, she needs to literally give it the water to drink, or the CO2 and the zinc, the water to drink. She needs to maybe even put it in a carrier for a few days and envelop the cat with patches of the ganses and make it a collar as well. And so you really have to, you know, go all out for a little while, and then it makes a difference. You can't just sort of, oh, well, I'll give a quick slug here, or I'll give a little bit of spray there, and maybe that will help me, because that's actually not quite enough, because there has to be that strong enough to feed the weaker to breach a threshold. So if you want to do it, you need to do it properly, which I know most of us, we battle with follow through on a lot of these things. But, you know, depending on how serious you are about keeping yourself healthy, and if you are inclined to getting ill.
I found the sore throat one. You kept the patch on there all night and the cold was gone by the next day, 12 hours.
Yeah, this is Kingsley Flowers speaking. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I'm a very new member to this group, and I find this information very interesting. But I'd just like to point out something. Back in the days when there was I think it was the Hendra virus problem with horses here in Australia, a gentleman that I will leave his name out at the moment just put food grade H2O2 in the horse's water, and that got rid of it. Now, I don't know whether this would have the same effect on pigs, etc. But what I can tell you was, over a decade ago, I personally had an affliction, I'll call it like that, where my back was so painful and uncomfortable that I couldn't even lie comfortably in bed. And I actually used food grade hydrogen peroxide, and that got rid of it within a matter of about a week. I noticed a difference within 24 hours. Whereas all the doctors were telling me that I had a back injury or some, a sports injury or something, which was bunkum. I believe that what I had was, what do you call it, Johnny?
Virus.
What do you call those, Johnny, worm-like things that get into your body sometime?
Parasite?
Sorry?
Parasite?
Parasites, that's right. That's what I was trying to think of. I believe that's all the problem was. Yeah.
Yeah.
What you possibly would have done there, which is it's a shotgun approach with all of these things until we figure everything out. But I reckon you changed the condition. So if it was a kind of a parasite, this is what we've discovered with using the CO2 and the different GANSs. Everything is due to environment.
Yes.
So if you change the environment of your body, that parasite will literally leave.
Yes.
But when you're using plasma instead of matter state medicines, you're changing the environment not only of your physical body, but at a higher energy level of, you can call it emotion, soul, all of these things, which have a much stronger effect on you than just the physical stuff. And so that's why the plasma works in very mysterious ways as well as the physical aspect of it.
What I will do is I'll follow up with this gentleman and just to find out exactly what he did, because that could be interesting.
Yes, that could be.
I know what I did, and certainly I can inform the group. I prefer to do it by setting out what I did on paper and post. Who's the president of the group, as I might call that?
You can send it to Irene.
Irene, okay. What's her email address? It's Irene at...
It's Irene at castleonhill.com. Did you hear that?
Yes.
Great.
Irene at Castle
On
dot
com.
Yeah. I think I've got emails from Irene on that.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Oh,
All
great.
right, well, that's all I can add at this stage until I get further facts.
Now that'd be very interesting to hear from that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And on a different subject, I am a retired electrical engineer, and when I heard about the Northern Rivers Plasma Group, I was very interested because I had been reading Mr. Caish's website, and I'm very interested in his spaceships, but he seems to have gone dead quiet on that. And also, I'm very interested in the units he's got for reducing the amount of electricity you use. I don't know whether you people have had an experience on that.
Yes, we have done MAGRAV systems. That was about 3 years ago already when the original group got going.
Yeah.
We did the MAGRAV systems. They
Yeah.
have varying amounts of success depending on how your house is wired for a start, how well they're created, because you have to make really good nanomaterials, really good GANSs. And the person who in this group still does a lot on the MAGRAVs is Gil, and he has perfected beautiful MAGRAVs. So he's somebody maybe that you can liaise with in terms of the MAGRAVs, because most of the group are not technical people and they're not really playing with the wires.
Yes.
Quite difficult. But yes, Gil is the guy to speak to, and the MAGRAVs do varying, have varying success and depending, because they often only will help the circuit that you have hooked it into, which means with Australia, there's so many circuits with different, and everything goes out to the box and then out.
Yes.
So you're not really gaining a full home. It's not covering your whole home because it's just literally on one set of plugs or something, which makes it a bit difficult. But yes, they do work, but with varying degrees in terms of how to make them. And, it takes months to do a good MAGRAV because you're nanocoating well and you're making proper GANSs.
Yeah, okay. And who was the gentleman that to contact?
It was Gil Rasmussen.
Gil
Rasmussen. Yes, look at
All right. Well, look, I'll start off by getting some information, so I'll pass on to Irene, and I guess I can get Gil's contact details as well.
Yeah.
She can give you Gil's contacts, yes.
Yes, okay. Well, thank you for that.
Thanks, Kingsley.
Yeah, if you can get Gil's contact details off Irene.
Yes, so that's what I meant.
Yeah, that won't be a problem. And if you're interested in buying them, I'm pretty sure he's the process of wanting to sell some at the moment.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So yeah.
You can invite him to your place.
Where does he
live?
Yeah, where are you?
Kingsley, where do you live?
I'm at Forest Lake in Brisbane.
Oh, so it's not far.
Well, I mean, it's Brisbane, yeah.
Yeah, that's 2 hours.
Come to the
You
next
want
meeting.
to talk to, you want to invite him to your place so you can sample your machines?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do that sort of off the Zoom, please.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I do. Hi, gang. Bruce here. I saw you were down at Coffs Harbour last week.
Yes. Okay.
With now understanding the swine thing, with the pigs, where they just sprayed and changed the environment outside the pigs and not having them drink the water, did that work if the CO2 was strong, or wasn't that part of the tests?
Well, that's what that section 4, where they never sprayed or gave the pigs the water, that was why they kept them like that, to actually see whether the environment itself would have an impact, which it did, because you saw with the number of deaths of the pigs, it was pretty uniform throughout the shed in those first couple of days. And you would think if those pigs weren't treated directly, they would show a higher death rate, but they didn't. So by treating the environment, you help those pigs as well without directly contacting them.
Thanks for that. Why I started with that was that was a lot of information to absorb. So now that that's the case, you know how you were saying that you tried some things with your micro vegetables, is that it, or micro herbs, the ones that are would would that same environment of the GANS just being sprayed around the growing area, and very strong, of course, would that go through to the plants as well?
Yes.
You don't even need to use GANS in that condition. You can use a very dilute GANS or just the water, because if you energize the water strongly and then use the water immediately, then it will act as the GANS. That's why we say to people, you know, energize your water and use it immediately, because the water won't hold its field for very long, but it will hold a good field. So you can then go and spray that GANS water around your plants, and yes, it does amazing things. We'll have an update on that quite shortly when we've done all our sample testing through Lismore University, which is on the card. We're busy with that at the moment, and it is showing remarkable results.
Thank you very much for that. I'll look forward to that. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa, Jimmy, are you still planning on coming down or coming up in June?
At this stage, yeah, I think we will.
Right.
My
Okay, everybody
birthday.
knows now?
My birthday.
Oh, great. Let us know when, and we'll
Okay.
welcome you with open arms.
Thanks. All right. Thanks, everybody, for attending, and those that came on Zoom as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa and Jimmy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.